Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to help you to open your mind, get curious about yourself and raise your consciousness levels. Through these conversations, we hope that you will go on an inward journey to discover the truth of who you are and become the conscious creator of your life. I am your host, Karen Maloney, and I work as an inside-out coach, mentor and guide, helping women to revolutionize their internal chatter and create a life they love. Listen to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you choose. And be sure to like, subscribe, review, and share the podcast. Check out my website as well, soulpowerlight.com, for more info. Hello everybody, welcome. How are you all doing? Thanks for joining and tuning in for another episode. I hope wherever you are that you're keeping well, you're doing well, and you're finding the good no matter what. I have another brilliant conversation for you this week, and my guest joining me is Paul Shepherd. And Paul is a Sydney-based entrepreneur, coach and creator of a unique system that helps leaders to live a life of purpose and meaning through a holistic 360-degree approach that nurtures mind, body and soul. After multiple successful years in business, making millions of dollars in his early 20s, he discovered that his life needed to change. Despite all the success, he didn't feel fulfilled, so he went on a journey to discover himself, his true values, and his calling, and he did just that. In his approach, he doesn't try to fit his clients into ill-fitting labels. His one-of-a-kind assessment approach provides an almost infinite amount of possible unique combinations, always perfectly suited for an individual. And now Paul is working one-to-one to share his learnings and lessons. It was great connecting with Paul and having this conversation and hearing from his side and a male perspective of how he never quite felt at home, or he didn't really know his place in the world. And although he had, all the worldly success, for want of a better word, he still had this deep feeling of unfulfillment. And once he himself started going more into the spiritual and esoteric, and especially astrology and human design, and going down that path, he started to learn more about himself and why exactly he was here. So this is a really brilliant conversation with Paul as well, who shares his perspective on why we're all here having this experience, and how through his work he helps people to essentially calibrate themselves and recalibrate themselves to their own truth and intuition. And a lot of the conversation centered around intuition, and Paul describes his work as entrepreneurship mixed with the spiritual world in order to help people feel more fulfillment and have more success in every aspect of their lives. And a crucial aspect in order to have that merging of the two really comes back to connecting to ourselves as well. And Paul shared one of his favorite all-time tools that really helps him to stay grounded and connected to himself. So lots in this conversation, and as well he shares about the genetic code, which through one technique in about 2 hours, he learned more about himself in those 2 hours than the previous 25 years he had spent in personal development and almost $500,000. So he talks a little bit about that, and he also shares how when we know our own decision-making process, how we can, again, better connect to ourselves and make decisions that are aligned for us. So lots in this conversation, and like that, it was great to connect Paul, to hear from a male perspective, and also he's a really calming energy about him in the way he talks and everything as well. So if you want to find out more on Paul's work, you can check out his website, which is Paul B for Bravo Shepherd, SHEPHERD.com. But as always, I will have everything linked as well on the show notes on my website, soulpowerlight.com and click the podcast section. Welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in for another episode. And today I have another wonderful guest joining me, Paul Shepherd. You're very welcome. Thanks, Paul, for joining.
Thanks, Karen. Lovely to join you too, and really looking forward to see what comes up in our conversation.
Yeah, just from our little chat there before we started recording, I think we're very aligned in certain thought systems and that, but we'll see what comes up in this conversation. But as we heard there in your bio, you're an entrepreneur, a coach, and you created a unique system to help leaders to live a life of purpose and meaning. But that wasn't always your, I suppose, area of work. So maybe if you just tell us a little bit about your background and kind of your journey to this work.
Sure, absolutely. So my challenge has always been, and like most entrepreneurs, right, they're trying to find a solution to a problem they've got before they can then offer that to the world. So for me, it was literally trying to find my place in the world. So starting out in corporate, or my first business as a personal trainer, moving into corporate, spent some time in the military, back into corporate, many businesses in between, but just not feeling like I was at home. So really feeling like I had a lot of skills, a lot of ambition, motivation, a desire to make the world a better place, but I didn't know how or why. So I found I could do some great things within the jobs I was doing, but I wasn't being recognized. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 years ago that I really kind of got into, like, seriously into the more spiritual, esoteric stuff, and astrology in particular, human design, working with some shamans, and just trying to get clarity on what my mission was. Why am I here? And through that process of trial and error and failures and successes, there was always one thing that was kept coming up, was that I'm not fulfilled. I can make money, I can get a job, I can execute on tasks, I can do certain things, but I just felt there was something much bigger. I know there's a lot of people out there feeling the same way, that they might be having a successful career or a great relationship, but there's always this niggling feeling that there's something missing. So that carried with me for 20 odd years, and it wasn't until I really stopped. I got a few wake-up calls in life and to correct me and get me back on track, and a lot of different experiences through personal development and spiritual development, which then gave me some clarity when it was coming into, I think it was an experience with human design actually, that highlighted or lifted the veil on who I actually was, and that resonated to the core, and that rocked my world essentially, because it was so deep and so reassuring and articulated in ways that I hadn't previously considered. And that began the experiment over the next few years of refining that, testing that, and looking at all the other tools that I'd been using and working with. So sort of bring them together under one system, if you like, to help other people solve the problem that I had spent 25 years trying to solve. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Amazing. So much of what you said there I loved, and actually I think it's really refreshing to hear as well from a male perspective that you just never felt quite at home or wondering where was your place, because I think again it comes down to the stigmas and the stereotypes given to both male and female, but to men, to be strong, this is the career path to achieve, to do. And I just think it's really refreshing to hear as well that actually, you did have that inner feeling of, well, what is my place? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Why don't I feel at home? So I love those questions. And I'm just going to throw a question at you that popped up at me since you said you delved deeper into the spiritual and the esoteric, and the question of why am I here? What did you uncover? For why are you here, or why are we here? I'm going straight in with that.
That's a good question, really. And I think most people, I'm not sure they can appreciate the answer to that until they've been on that journey. For me, I believe now that we're all here we're all soul having a human experience, and we're all here to evolve and experience different aspects of what it is like to be human. Love, compassion, and fear, and anger, and resentment, all these different emotions we're here to experience. And for me, it's really like that one thing. That one thing's clear. It's all about evolution, evolving. So whether I'm failing or whether I'm succeeding, whatever it is, anything I'm doing, I'm evolving essentially, and I'm collecting information on a energetic level. So that's the first thing I think, which is a generic for everyone. But for me, in particular, it's really about helping people eliminate doubt and helping them navigate a better future. So showing them there's a better way in the future. And I do that obviously through coaching and helping people recognize who they truly are at the core, what they're really here for, and how they can then utilize their skills to go about making a life with those skills and feeling fulfilled and making money and all the rest of it. So that, in a nutshell, it's obviously deeper than that. There's some other skills in there, but essentially I'm bringing the entrepreneurship into a bit of a mix with the spiritual world. So, call it spiritual entrepreneurship if you like, soulpreneurs, but I think getting entrepreneurs more aligned with their soul purpose puts them on track to more fulfillment, greater contribution, greater satisfaction, more success in every area, and something they can leave a legacy behind and be proud of.
Yes, I love that. And I do agree. It absolutely takes some deeper inner work to really comprehend the weight of your answer and, the fact of we're here to have this experience, to experience all these things, good and bad, because this is the embodiment that we get to have as a spirit on this plane. So I love that. And then from your space as well in entrepreneurship and that, do you see, or maybe not entrepreneurship, but do you see a lot of people going around in that kind of unfulfilled state? Yes, they're making money. Yes, they've all the successes, but they have that niggling feeling still. Or do you think many people are still quite asleep to it and just keep plodding along?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I've never done any sort of quantitative analysis on that, but I've had many conversations with all sorts of people. I had a great conversation with a friend that I hadn't spoken to for about 8 years yesterday. We had a 2-hour conversation, and this exact topic came up. And he said to me, look, at 5 years old, I could sense things. I was an empath. My whole childhood, I could feel people's emotions. I could see through things. I had this sixth sense that I couldn't understand. And I came into my adulthood and wanted to make money, obviously, to provide for a family and navigate the 3D material world. So he ignored all of the spiritual stuff and kind of shut it down, thought that, I can make money without it. And now he's 53 and he's come back to everything he'd shut down. And he's lost everything in some context, gained a lot in terms of wisdom and experience. But he's come full 360 again to realize that, oh my gosh, what am I here for? It's this midlife crisis that a lot of people go through, realizing, well, I've made a lot of money, or I've done a lot of things that society said I should be happy with, but I'm not quite happy, and there's something more and I don't know what it is, but I don't want to go into the spiritual stuff because it's too woo-woo and it doesn't make sense, and I don't really have any guides and mentors and people who can give me clarity in that, so I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing, but then it's not really working. So that was the topic of the conversation we had, and I realized that I just sort of said to him, look, you're exactly where you need to be. I said, and what your soul is bringing up, what your spirit's bringing up for you, is that there's something much bigger for you. And you've got all these amazing skills in life now that you've learned through the businesses you've had, through the hard knocks, everything you've done. So why can't you put that to good use now for a cause that isn't focused about the money? Because money isn't his highest value. And that's one of the things we look at is getting clear on what our value system is and then aligning ourselves to our soul purpose. And then we've got clarity around how we should approach our mission in the world and how we're going to go about doing it. But yeah, I think for the majority, most people aren't open to this. And as you've probably seen too, Karen, current world situation is a classic example of that, right?
Yeah.
But I do believe there's a lot of people out there at different ends of the spectrum and different levels of the spectrum that have got some burning questions or some itches, if you will, where they're starting to question things. So yeah, it'd be interesting to study if someone has done that to see where the population's at as a whole.
Yeah, it would be. And that's super interesting as well that you were just having that conversation with a friend who, at kind of 53 is coming back to this part of us. And for me as well, in my own case, I can say, yeah, I can look back and say I was highly intuitive. But again, it's not given any weight, especially in Western society. We're taught that it's so airy fairy and it's woo woo and it's not concrete, so forget about it. You have to live from the planning, the logical, the rational thinking mind in order to achieve and gain success. And there's an aspect of both, absolutely, but again, it's at what expense? How long do we keep going on this path until we choose to connect back or to wake up? And you mentioned yourself as well, you got a few wake up calls, and that's essentially what happens. But again, like you were saying to your friend, I totally agree. It's that coming to acceptance as well of, well, this was my path. I had to go off on this massive detour and do all these things and totally forget about this part of myself and end up with whatever it was, totally broke or on the top of the financial scale, but totally empty inside. To start come back to
journey.
Yeah,
the hero's journey.
That's exactly.
Have you found, Karen, that
No, go on.
I was just going to ask you if you found that spending time in nature or smaller towns outside major cities has made an impact? Because that's been an experience I've seen, is people who have spent time in quieter places outside big cities tend to have more of a connection to themselves.
Hugely so. And even more so as well, say, in my case, I always felt like the black sheep, and I was the only one of my friends who, after university, decided, I don't know what I want, but I definitely don't want any of this. And I went off traveling. And it was so funny to me because I remember specifically being in Guatemala, and I was in this family home. We're out walking or something, and this family invited us in. And I mean, they probably were, I don't want to say more well off, but they had a stone house and it was plastered, but inside it was completely, dirt floor. There was no furniture, there was no painting, there was no nothing. And the kitchen was a hole in the ground outside that there was a grate over. And I mean, when I say it was a stone house, I mean, it was literally a rectangle. There was no separate rooms, there was no hallway, there was no kitchen and bedrooms. It was literally a one room space with the kitchen outside, which again was just a bit of a side awning, and literally like that, a hole in the ground with a grate over it, a fire pit essentially. That was the kitchen. And they had just some small low to the ground wooden stools. But they invited us in, we sat in the ground, they had cheese and they made quesadillas and they shared everything with us, and they didn't want any money or anything like that. And I remember, and it's an image that still sticks with me, and I suppose it's why I packed my job and took off again, because I was like, there's more to life. Those people were so happy, they were so content, they were so just present and enjoying it all. And even now, being back in Mexico, like, life is hard and it's difficult and they work long hours, but they're just, I don't know, there's a different energy. It's not just all about the money. They still help you, they support each other, they'll share, they'll connect, they have time for a chat and a smile. It's definitely, it is something that I've noticed, and being in those quieter and less, I want to say, cosmopolitan areas, they definitely are more connected as well. It's actually not even cosmopolitan either, because I mean, I'm from the west of Ireland. I'm from a small town that would hardly be cosmopolitan, but it is just a different energy. Like, here it feels like there's life, people are enjoying, like, yeah, it's hard, there's challenges, but there's so much laughter and fun and music and energy. And, for me, being in these places and having traveled so much, it just gives me the bigger perspective. And I'm so much happier, because the truth is, we can't bring any of it with us. And that doesn't mean we have to struggle. But for me, it is always about finding the joy. I'd rather be happy than miserable, just doing a job and going through the motions for the sake of it, which I was doing. But say, with your background and experience as well, and having, I suppose, reached the top of the ladder, for want of a better word, career-wise, but still feeling that emptiness, and now having undergone your own hero's journey and come to being of service and helping others do the same, how, for a person who maybe is feeling those niggles, but yes, there are realities, we've bills to pay in that, How or what would you say to them to support them or to get their mind thinking of how they could possibly transition into something that's more fulfilling? That was a long-winded question, but any practical tips, basically?
Yeah, lots of practical tips, and thanks for sharing that story too. It's beautiful when I hear that people are just so connected, and I think that's the key here. Is if we look at science and a lot of research has come out, what's the cause of a lot of addictions? It's disconnection.
Yeah,
they're disconnected from themselves, disconnected from source, disconnected from Mother Earth. They're disconnected from spirit. They're disconnected from their family and friends, from their community. And look at what's happening around the world right now with COVID, right? It's classic where there's so much disconnecting going on with isolation. And the death toll from that isolation is more than the virus itself. I know statistics here in Australia, it's about 3 times greater. So if we connect again back to ourselves, back to our spirit, back to the earth, and these people you mentioned in Guatemala, they've got dirt floors. Grounding is so healing. Time in nature is so healing. Spending time with family and friends, and I know when I spend time in nature, I have to do it weekly. I'll go out for a weekend just out in the mountains, or just spend time in a national park. It's so beautiful, but that clears the mind. It's a different frequency. I think if people spend more time doing that, off the technology, into nature, and being around those frequencies, literally turn your phone off or put it on airplane mode, get the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi turned off. It's a different vibration, and it's going to take time, because there's always this mental analysis trying to second guess and judge, what are those feelings I've got coming in? And as you said earlier, you had these messages coming to you that you've got to move to Mexico. Despite the logic and rationale, you had this really strong voice or message telling I've got to do it in February.
Yeah.
So most people have these messages, but they just don't recognize it, and they second guess it with the logical mind. And that was my problem. I went through life with the logical mind, trying to make decisions when that's not, in fact, how we make decisions. And human design taught me that. It's all done through the body, through the energetics and this intuition, if you will, or the gut, or there's different decision-making strategies for different people. So the best advice I can suggest to people is start to connect with yourself more. The answers lie within, not outside of you. There's no guru out there that's going to give you the answer. Sure, they can help guide you and teach you and share some things with you that will highlight aspects of yourself. But at the end of the day, it's you need to do the work by going in, that intention. Yeah. So that's my biggest tip to people. And the best way to do that is time in nature, meditation, and start to connect with yourself, and don't discard those messages that come up, those feelings, or that sixth sense, or we've all got it to different degrees and different methods and different ways of having it. But that's the key. That really is the answer. And if you can then tap into your decision-making strategy, that will guide you. That's your compass. Yeah.
It's so true. And it's something that has been mentioned so many times on different episodes. And I've said myself is, this is the truth. And again, we all know it. And like you say, we all have these messages, but we all absolutely face the fear and that rational mind, or the thinking mind of, oh, what are you doing? That's insane. Better not do that. Oh, it's safer to do this. That's a waste, whatever it is. But we can only know the truth of it when we take action, when we actually follow, when we give it a go. And the thing about intuition is it's an intellect far higher than our logical thinking, rational mind. But what's the saying? It doesn't give the answers beforehand. You have to follow, and then the truths or the messages will be like, oh, this is why, will be revealed. It's not something that we can plan and try figure out beforehand. So
totally.
That's always
100%.
And that's the thing with the action. And no more than you, no more than anyone else I've spoken to, myself, we've all been people who have done this, as in followed the action, faced the fears, moved through the resistances in order to explore and see what's on the other side. And it's only through practice and discipline and continually doing it that you build that trust as well, going, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, because we can never know what's going to happen, but I know this is something I need to explore, and following that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a good example of this too, Karen, is we've all had that sense of something, right? Whether it's a person we wanted to date or marry, or a job we should have taken or not taken, or a business or a client, whatever it is. I've had many scenarios where I've thought, oh yeah, that's great. I'll take this contract because it's great money, and with great money I can set my business up, and then I can choose my clients down the track. But my body was telling me, no, Paul, that's not a good idea. Don't do it. And I'm like, well, shut up. What are you talking about?
This is a
I need to
great
build
plan.
a business. That's right. We're in business to make profit, right? And make a difference and serve. But I need profit because that allows me to impact more people, and I'm going to do it, right? So, but there's this resistance within my body that's like a tightening of the chest, or an aversion that's pushing me away from taking on that particular client. And at the time, I don't know what that actually means, because it's the first time I felt this feeling. So I go ahead and do it. And then all of a sudden, I've got the next 12 months of nightmares and headaches dealing with this client. In other words, it's taken up all my time and frustration. And eventually I lose them because they're just a difficult client, just an incompatibility and an expectation match that's different. And it's just like, wow, okay, so had I listened to that, maybe I would have picked up a bunch of other clients that would have been a lot more grateful, happy, successful. I could have made more of an impact on more flow, less stress, more money, everything. And that's the reality of making the wrong decisions. Is we end up in a situation where life becomes so much harder for us.
Yeah.
And but we don't know that at the time. Yeah. We just think logically that sounds good. Yes. And I've met so many people who've had this in all walks of life, and whether it's relationships, having children, whether it's businesses, career, whatever it is, but I can always guarantee you every one of those people had a feeling. Everyone I've spoken to has had this feeling to different degrees that they didn't listen to. And that's part of as you said, trust, building trust, and what I call calibrating your intuition so you can logically understand what it's trying to say to you.
Yes, love that word, calibrating. But again, when you think about it, it comes back to, though, again, society and how we've been programmed, because we have all been programmed, and we've been programmed to believe that, well, this is the way to success. Like, yes, money is necessary in life. It's not to say, oh, take a spiritual path or follow your intuition and be forever poor. No, make all the money in the world if you want. But again, because money it gives capacity to do more if that's what you want to do. But again, it's like you're saying there, it's if you're feeling the resistance, even if it seems like a logical idea, it's waiting for aligned action, because there is so much abundance in the world. There is no shortage. There is enough for everyone to go around. But again, it comes back for me to the programming of how we think this is the only path. I have to say yes because it equates to X amount of money, even though I feel a bit shit about it. It doesn't feel great, but I have to say yes. I have no other choice. So the conversation today is, yes, there is always another choice, but we have to be open to allow that to come through. And like you're saying, that's the journey of coming back to ourselves, the journey of going within, the journey of building that trust within ourselves as well, within each other, like you mentioned there as well. We all have to be our own guru, all our answers and our own truth does lie within us. Nobody else can tell us. But ultimately, it's that unraveling and the freeing ourselves of those to come back to our own truth. And I know in your own work as well, you use some different techniques, and I know you use something called the genetics code as well. What is that exactly, or how do you use that to support people as well in helping to find that true flow and fulfillment for them?
Yeah, it's a big part actually, Karen. It's as you said, right, the intuitive space is quite abstract. It's really hard to put something tangible around it for our logical mind to comprehend it. And that's what we've been taught through school, is this logical kind of structured frameworks. But intuition and feelings and emotions is not something that we're really well versed on. So for me, having a very logical mind, it's all about how do I make sense of all this? So the genetic code really is going through multiple different types of astrology and essentially creating this Venn diagram where there's just these different overlays of what are your strengths, what's your life purpose, what What are your shadows? What are you here to learn in this lifetime? That's one aspect from a soul level that gives you this fractal imprint at the moment that you're born. And that, to me, highlighted or explained so many things that I could never explain previously. There were so many things that came up through my first session with this when I was going through as a student. And I thought, my gosh, where was this 25 years ago? I spent close to $500,000 on personal and spiritual development and over 25 years, but 2 hours with this one technique gave me more than I'd got in 25 years. And I thought, you're kidding me. This has got to be in schools. This needs to be in school systems. Because if kids knew who they were coming into the adult world before they choose a university degree, they wouldn't make all these mistakes. And sure, mistakes are considered part of life and lessons, but if you could be in flow at a much younger age, how much further ahead, how much more of an impact could you make? How much more fulfillment could you have if you were given the blueprint to your own life much earlier on, as opposed to in your mid-40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it's going to be, when people typically are lower on energy and in despair and may not have what it takes to start over again. So that, to me, that's part of the genetic code is the soul level through different types of astrology. And then there's other aspects that we then go into the physical genetics from a medical perspective. And we basically break it down to say, right, what are your predominant hormones and what's your body type and what are your risk factors and how does your body essentially operate in this 3D material world, so you can get the most out of life from that perspective. So it could be certain timings of when you eat, it could be the types of exercise that are best for you, the timing of exercise, the environment that you perform best in, whether it's a hot, dry or humid, cold climate, whatever it is. So there's just multiple layers that I just keep adding to this, and things that I take out and things that I adjust. But essentially, it's your own guidebook. And then the ultimate test of this, and again, I say to people, don't believe anything I say. Go through the experiment, right? But when you teach someone their decision-making strategy, that then becomes their guidepost. So everything I teach people and share through these techniques, at the end of the day, they then become the master of their own kind of reality, because they're using their decision-making strategy to validate everything I'm sharing. And that is kind of the pretense of everything I do is I'm going to share some amazing things with you that's going to give you some insights and some perspectives that you've probably never heard, and it's going to make life make a lot more sense to you. But at the end of the day, it's going to come back down to this decision-making strategy that I'm going to teach you how to use, and that is going to validate everything from here on in your life. And that's the most powerful thing I've found.
Yeah, epic. I hadn't heard of that before, the genetic code, but it just sounds so fascinating. And again, I totally agree. There's so much that should be included to children in schooling, and even bits and pieces that I've learned throughout my journey as well. I've had so many moments of, oh my God, like, how did I not know this? How could I be so blind about myself? How is this not told to us or taught to us? But again, it's the bigger perspective as well, as opposed to going down that tunnel of frustration and anger. It's, using it of, okay, well, I've learned this now, and who can I serve? And, through your work as well, that's what you're doing, and helping people, giving them all the information, helping them know so many different facets of themselves. But yet, that's not the truth either. It's more, it comes down to, well, it can say X, Y, and Z in a chart, but again, coming back to and knowing, well, like you said, your ultimate decision making as well, strategy to be able to help them actually choose moment to moment what is right for them. Because again, we are the best authority over ourselves. Nobody else can tell us or make us or know what's right for us. And just since you mentioned it, and I know obviously it's a deep process and a big strategy, but what are some of the elements of the decision making strategy? Is there anything that's possible to share for people?
Yeah, look, it's a different for every person. So there's a number of different decision making strategies based on a whole bunch of different aspects. But essentially, it's like, for me, it's wait to respond, and then I go through this emotional wave. So for me personally, I'm not designed to go out there and make things happen in life. I've been this bulldog chasing things my whole life. And I remember a mentor of mine said to me a long time ago, stop chasing everything, Paul. Slow down so that life can catch up to you, right? You're literally running away from everything. And I thought, whatever, you know what you're talking about, right? At the time, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Now that I've had this explained to me on a scientific kind of spiritual level, it just makes so much sense. So for me, I need to set my intention, so manifest, put out into the field what it is that I want. So making a decision is the first thing. So deciding what I want and then waiting for those opportunities to come to me in life. Then I need to respond. So listen to what my body's telling me. Is it pulling me into this particular thing, or is it pushing me away? And I'm very aware of that now. Could be as simple as, hey, do you want to go to this restaurant for dinner tonight? It's just like that to me is a definite no.
Yeah.
If there's any energetic hesitation or resistance, it's a no. Versus, oh my gosh, yeah, love to. That sounds amazing. Can't wait. That's a yes. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. And then if it's a bigger decision, then specifically it's more around going through this emotional wave. So some people have these emotional waves they go through. And there's about 4 different types of, or maybe 6 different types of emotional waves. So for me, I have to go through the highs and the lows at least once before I can identify a baseline emotionally. So I'm literally using my emotions to make that decision. And then I've got to wait to see, just feel through the process and not let the mind get in the way, because the mind's always going to try and interrupt and force things. Right? Oh, you got to make a decision, or you're running out of money because of, whatever's going on in your life financially, or, there's some sort of external pressure which comes from the mind only, but the body always knows what's right. So that's essentially my process. And I literally once we identify what someone's decision-making strategy is, I walk them through a workflow diagram and I give them exercises to practice that. And everyone gets it. Yeah. And this is the most profound thing, is once people practice this, they're like, oh my gosh, Paul, this is so effective. It works. Now I'm actually making decisions that are right for me, and all that pain and suffering is drifting away. And there's a lot less resistance in my life now that I'm making the right decisions. So yes, it's different for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's where sort of the sort of coaching comes in. The whole process that I take people through allows them to have that clarity, but then, it's a tool that you've got for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm giving you a astrology reading session for today and then you got to come back next month. It's like, no. Here is the keys to your body. Mm-hmm. This is how you interpret it. Go and practice for the rest of your life now. And here's some exercises and tools and tips and community that you can plug into so that you can ultimately become your own master.
Yeah. So true. And that's ultimately what it is, or the way I look at my work as well. They are life skills, because they're things, as I always say, our body is the greatest piece of technology we will ever own in our lives. But we're not taught the first thing about it. So when we do learn to tune in and build that conscious connection and know what each emotion feels like, and know what we're going through, and know what feels right for us, and know what feels wrong, and all these things, then it's like, oh, wow, my life is so different now. And I love how you say you were constantly, going like a bulldog and chasing. And I think, again, that was me as well. But again, I think it comes back to society and how we were taught to be. And for me as well, there's the bigger picture of that's all the masculine energy and the feminine energy. This has nothing to do with individuals, because we all have both. But the feminine energy has been so disregarded and perceived as weak in society, and especially in Western society, as we were going through globalism and growth. And that masculine is the constant do, plan, achieve, go, more, construct, build, bigger, better. And there's an element of that, but that's why as well I'm like, well, this is why we're at the crux we're at in society on the greater scheme of things as well, because that feminine has been totally quashed. So it's about all of us coming back to that. And the feminine is the more intuitive, the bodily, the emotions, the flow, the ease, the allowing, the receiving. Because like that, I never stop for a moment to, like you say, to allow life to show up, or to even know what an aligned action was showing up for me, because I was just living from the level of mind of thinking, okay, that didn't work, then I have to try this and this and this. And I think many people are like that. So it's a much bigger thing that's going on now as well. And even as a final question, just speaking on that and the shifts that we're going through, you mentioned it a couple of times throughout the conversation, going on how we were living, how we were programmed, and this shift we are going through. What's your perspective on it, or what do you see is happening in a grander perspective?
Well, that's a good point. I'd just go back to what you mentioned about femininity, first of all, and masculine energy. You're right. It's men have been programmed to not share their emotions and feelings because it's considered weak. But it's actually the greatest strength.
Totally.
Emotional, intelligent people are more successful than just people with a high IQ. And that's been proven time and time again. Because at the end of the day, what are we? We're all human beings. It's all about communication. It's all about connection. You could be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't communicate and connect with other people, how are you going to have any sort of fulfillment and success in this world? You're going to struggle. So that's been one of my biggest lessons too. And I remember a conversation years back at an event. I went to a personal development event for 5 days, and it was a conversation on the bus on the way home from this. Actually, it was a hacienda in Mexico, actually. I was at an event. We had this amazing party with 400 people, and 3 o'clock in the morning, a really staunch-looking dude in a trench coat sits next to me and says, "Do you mind if I sit here next to you, Paul?" I said, "Sure, go for it." He said, "Do you want some feedback?" And I said, "Love feedback. Just be brutally honest with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings." And he said, "Look, practice vulnerability." And I said, "What do you mean vulnerability? I've come out of the military," literally, at that point. I said, "I actually don't know what that means. Can you give me examples and articulate that for me?" So we spent an hour. I had a lesson on vulnerability. And it took me 6 months to wrap my head around it, because my whole programming throughout life was, don't show your weaknesses and got to be a man and you got to be the best person you can be. But it was that vulnerability that allowed me to be more comfortable playing in my feminine side, sharing my weaknesses, which allowed me to connect with people, which allowed me to then make more of an impact and allow others to be human as well. So I think, in answer to your question on what's happening now in the world, is sure, there's a lot of, let's call it drama, but I think that's all part of the infinite possibilities of the universe and balance. When there's light, there's dark. When there's dark, there's light. There's good, there's bad. That's just how things are. Yeah. And everything is exactly where it needs to be. And I truly believe that we need to go through challenges to become something or someone. You don't just become, a superhero or a successful business person if you had it given to you on a golden platter. You have to work for it. You've got to earn your stripes. And that applies both in the business world, in the career, in relationships, in the spiritual domain. You've got to rediscover yourself. You've got to go through the process, and that's the only way you're going to get to where you need to be. And I think one of the biggest values I look for in a partner or people I'm working with is the growth mindset. You may not have the skills today, but if you are curious and you have that growth mindset, then you're successful, period. You will achieve success in different ways, and that's essentially why we're all here. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. And I 1,000,000% agree. And it's funny what was coming up for me as you were saying all that as well. I'm like, it's like the conversation has come full circle. And essentially, what you're talking about there in the bigger picture that I believe we're going through as well, it's really asking us to connect. It's that word, connect back to ourselves, because we don't know ourselves. We're so disassociated from ourselves, most of us who haven't undertaken the journey, that this is a call for us all to come back into connection with ourselves, because when we connect to ourselves, then we can connect to others, then we can connect to the Mother Earth, then we can connect to everything more consciously, because we are connected to the truth of ourselves. So super powerful conversation. I loved it, Paul. It was so lovely to connect with you, and you've such a beautiful, graceful energy and way of speaking that it's a pleasure to listen to you as well. But please share where people can find out more about your work as well. And if there's anything parting coming up for you you'd like to share, feel free to share it as well.
Thanks, Karen. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really wish you the best on your journey too. I know you're doing some amazing work, and it's always a pleasure to connect with like-minded souls. So if people do want to reach out, just Paul B for Bravo Shepherd, SAGPHERD.com. I also have a Facebook group called Soul Purpose Mastery Methodology, where people can literally come in, and it's a free group to join, but what we're doing in there is I'm actually giving people sort of high-level analysis of themselves if they're willing to share their personal information. So that's Soul Purpose Mastery Methodology on Facebook. But truly wish you all the best, Karen, and your listeners, and it was an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you. And as always, I will have everything linked as well on the show notes, so anyone can go there as well and find your links. So Paul, wishing you all the best. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get notified every time a new show is released. Get more information on this week's guest as well on my website www.soulpowerlight.com.